and I strongly encourage you to seek your own legal advice. So with that, if we're able to share the presentation.
Can you see that?
Yes.
All right, you tell me when you want me to go to the next slide and I'll go to the next slide, Scott.
Okay, well, we can move on to the next slide.
There we go.
So, as Sam highlighted, you know, the Strata Titles Amendment Bill and the Community Titles Bill passed through Parliament November 2018. The general regulations, Strata Title general regulations, made into Parliament, I think, 4:59 p.m. on the 31st of December. I think they're very keen to not have a 2-year gap between the Act and the regs, so that they did manage to squeeze that in. And as you all will be aware tonight, a proclamation took effect as on Friday last week, the 1st of May. While a lot of strata managers have been preparing for this for a long time, we actually only found out through the Minister 2 weeks ago that it was going to be proclaimed 1st of May. We knew that date, but there was never any certainty, and particularly this COVID pandemic has created a lot of uncertainty about whether it actually come through. But so it probably has caught us a little bit unprepared. So please do be patient with your strata manager over the next few weeks. There is a lot of preparation that has to go behind the scenes, reprogramming, making a lot of amendments in your program, changing all of your agendas, all of your proxy forms, all of your other notifications, all the references to the old Act are now out of date and referencing new sections of the Act. So there is a fair bit that we are working on, and we're slowly getting there. So if you move to the next slide.
I can do that.
As I highlighted, tonight's presentation is a council owners checklist and what do they need to be thinking about. Section 118 is something really I've only become aware of over the last few weeks, so that is a new one for me. I knew it was there, but probably didn't quite appreciate the implications it was going to have. Section 119, I've been debating with a number of people for quite some time about the implications that will have, and we'll go over that. But we'll go through this basic checklist for the councillors and those people that take a more active role in their scheme, and hopefully this will be helpful for them. So if we move on to the next slide.
Sure can.
So as I highlighted, Section 118 talks about the need for an ordinary resolution to be passed enabling someone on behalf of the scheme to use the common seal and sign contracts and documents, and arguably that would be the Council of Owners. So with the need is certainly there now, in that if you have an obligation to enter into a new contract for the scheme, which may be, as simple as maybe even an insurance renewal, change of insurer, or an appointment of a new broker. There's often, there is a document there that needs to be executed. Energy contracts, appointment of contractors. These are documents that need to be signed on a regular basis on behalf of the strata company. And I would be suggesting that strata companies now need to be calling a general meeting and just passing an ordinary resolution authorising the members of the council to sign these contracts, and maybe even go so far as saying the 2 members of the council owners need to sign the contract, not just one, and potentially extending that authority to the strata manager, because a lot of the time the councils don't always have the ability to come into the strata manager's office to sign, some of the more mundane contracts. And so, you could go as far as saying that if the council owners authorise the strata manager at a meeting of the council, then the strata manager could also then sign the contract. So that's certainly something strata companies probably need to tick off now. Now that the benefits of the new reforms is we can actually do this electronically, and there's the ability to push out a motion electronically, just this one item on the agenda. So it's something to be looking at. There's also the approval required for the common seal and who can affix the common seal. While new schemes aren't actually required to have a common seal, most existing schemes do have a common seal, and arguably the fixing of a common seal is for more high-level legal documents, and I would argue that you'd probably want to see the fixing of a common seal requiring a resolution passed at a general meeting of the strata company for the seal to be affixed, and that it then has to be affixed under authority or signed off by 2 members of the council as well. But each strata company to their own, that resolution can be worded depending on the requirements of individual schemes. But regardless, I think you still need to look at a motion, an ordinary resolution passed as soon as possible.
So was this not the same before, Scott?
No. Like effectively, the council owners have always had the ability to enter into a contract, and there hasn't necessarily been the need for a motion at a general meeting to authorise that. But going forward, this now needs to be passed, and I would suggest it's not clear. I would suggest it's a resolution that should sit on the agenda at every annual general meeting of the strata company, and it just gets done as part of the regular motions which you have to get through. Maybe it could be argued it only has to be passed once, but I think because you're always having that change in council and change in owners, I would recommend that this sits on every agenda going forward.
Okay, and so what does this actually do when you actually then sign documents on behalf of the scheme? What is that meant to be doing? What's this meant to be actually providing?
Well, it's qualifying who can sign it. So it would be argued that an individual member of the council can't just go off and sign a contract, as currently can happen.
Like a 2 signatures on a check, basically.
So the strata company is saying, yes, you can go and sign a contract on behalf of the strata company, but we want 2 members of the council that are there and execute that contract. So it's not just 1 member of the council. Right. And again, fixing of the common seal, as I said, it's high-level documents. Arguably, you might want everyone in the strata company to be aware when the common seal has been used. So you may stipulate that the affixing of the common seal, first of all, there has to be a motion passed by the strata company prior to the common seal being affixed to a more high-level legal document.
All right, cool. Next slide.
Yep. So this is my favourite section of the new legislation.
Why is that?
119. So what this is saying is any motion or bylaw or action of the strata company cannot be unfairly prejudicial or discriminatory, and it cannot be oppressive or unreasonable against any one lot owner. Now, a few months ago, John Parks from Cott Gunning, he gave us a presentation on this one, and he argued that this section of the Act is in contrary to a High Court decision which said where there's a benefit to the whole by unfortunately being unreasonable or oppressive to an individual, you can still make that decision. Well, Section 119 is actually saying that, well, no, you can't, even if it's to the benefit of the whole strata company, if it's unfairly prejudicial or discriminatory against that one owner, then that owner can take it to SAT and arguably have it challenged and overturned.
Right, okay. So have you seen situations in the past where this would be applicable or would be a good solution?
In just about every action that the strata company takes, there's always someone unhappy.
Yes.
It's very hard to please everyone in a big scheme, even in a small scheme. So I would argue that it's very hard to please everyone. Everyone has their own opinion and has their own, and they're entitled to their own opinion and their own perceived take on certain motions. So yeah, this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
So the other section of this, it also goes on to say that if we move on to, sorry, the next slide.
Yeah.
The other section of section 119 is it also means a person who becomes an owner of the scheme can challenge the performance of the strata company. So where I see this might play out, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer, but if you're passing your 10-year maintenance plans and you pass it at the first AGM, and in year one you say you're going to fix the roof, and year two you're going to fix the driveway, and then we have a purchaser buy-in in year three, and it's found that you haven't fixed the roof and you haven't repaired the driveway, and you haven't even raised sufficient funds to deal with any of that, and now in year three you're looking to raise some funds to fix those items you're looking to address in year one, year two, then that purchaser, they are provided the 10-year maintenance plan with an understanding that these items have actually been addressed. And if they're buying in year three, they may actually say, well, I'm not going to contribute to the reserve fund to address those items. I'll contribute to the reserve fund for future items, but not retrospective items. So it might be one instance where it could be challenged at SAT, but certainly other items, plan works that aren't progressed, poor workmanship, so the strata company doesn't adequately do their due diligence in the appointing of a contractor, and it ends up costing the scheme a lot more money. Maybe an owner could potentially challenge the strata company, its performance with regards to meeting that objective. Saying that, there is the protections for the councils where as long as they're providing adequate due diligence and acting in a reasonable manner, then they're protected there. But Section 119 will be interesting to see how it plays through.
That's interesting because I've had a number of discussions. As you know, I'm actually having a Zoom meeting every Friday morning now for WA and then also the East Coast, where people are calling in and talking to me about what's going on in their strata companies. And I could see how something like this actually could really come into play for quite a few people. And I think, unfortunately, there might be some people out there as well who are just loving a bit of conflict and who might actually utilise this, hey, to cause a bit of disrupt. Do you think, Scott? You're smiling. That's a good smile, darling.
I think it's going to become somewhat more litigious. In the end,
when Mark's rubbing his hands with glee.
Well, when I've been in the property industry for nearly 20 years, I have only stepped into strata not quite 6 years ago. And 6 years ago, you could count on one hand good lawyers that understand strata.
Yeah.
These days, they've all come out of the woodwork, lawyers thinking they know about strata. I think every law firm's now got a strata department. And that's because I think they see an opportunity there. And I do feel it will be a little bit more litigious going forward.
Yeah, because as you say, there's always one person that's kind of like not happy. As I always say, there's always this one squeaky wheel, right? That's why I started the WA Apartment Advocacy. So this, in a way, does actually cause me a bit of concern. Should I be concerned?
No, in the end, SAT is a low-cost jurisdiction. I think SAT will be quite quick to rule out frivolous complainers. I'm hoping they will. Yeah. So let's just see how it plays out.
Yeah, cool. All right, next slide.
So there are increased obligations now on the council of owners. There's section 135, the functions and constitution of the councils. And this is their protection. As long as they act reasonably, they have to make sure that they properly call their meetings now going forward. It can't just be a matter of you run into your neighbour in the corridor, he's also on the council, and you guys then decide on a decision of the strata company, and you email all the others and say, we've decided this and we're going to now appoint this person. I don't think that's going to be sufficient going forward. I think it's really important that if you're going to be on the council, that you get used to calling council meetings. You need to give 7 days notice. You need to make sure all the councillors are invited, and you need to minute the decisions that come out of that. And there's going to be a lot more paperwork going forward. And it's also important to point out, I would argue that all the email correspondence amongst councillors now become records of the strata company. So if you're on the council, be very careful what you're emailing around, because the strata man should arguably be saving those emails now as part of the books and records of the strata company.
Well, with all due respect, you should be holding regular meetings of the strata company. You know, our council of owners meet every month, and we actually do involve our strata manager, and I'll acknowledge James Donnelly, who's joined us today. So we have our strata manager actually come and sit with us and actually take the minutes of the meeting, and then they actually then send out the minutes. And I think, and they do the agenda. And I think, you know, if you're not doing that as a council of owners, I would highly recommend that you start doing that, because I know the number of times I have said to Stacey, who works for James, Stacey, can we do this? And she can then say yay or nay. I think with this new act, we really need to be very mindful that as a council of owners, we're very much like, you know, a kind of like a board, aren't we? We're kind of like being held liable for any decisions that get made.
Well, arguably you are the board of directors for the strata company, and you have the same obligations as the board of directors. You know, as long as you're acting reasonably, then you should be okay. But there are a lot more obligations now imposed on the council, and that passing in the corridor or making decisions, it's not the right way to go about things now. I think you really do need to be calling your meetings properly and minuting the decisions which you're making.
Correct. Now, and I think that's, you know, I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, if anyone says anything, you need to be able to go back, and the paper trail is there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, next slide.
Yes.
For some reason, I cannot do the slideshow and also move down. All right, keep going. Sorry, Scott.
Okay. So yeah, so as I said, you know, the council, they must at all times act honestly, with loyalty and in good faith in the performance of their functions as a member of the council. They must at all times exercise a degree of care and diligence in the performance of those functions. And this is where people need to understand, particularly from the council, there are added obligations now imposed through this 10-year maintenance plan. You know, there are a lot of works that now have to be maintained and properly project managed. Now, if you don't have the time to be able to give to managing those projects, and arguably if you don't have the skill set, and you know, a lot of people don't have the skill set to properly project manage certain work projects. Okay, maybe a landscaping project in the gardens, yes, you know, you could see that one through, but if you have a big, you know, $10,000, $20,000 works program, I would argue you should get in a project manager, or have your building manager deal with that, and outsource that. And so therefore there is a third party helping you manage your 10-year maintenance plan going forward. Taking on those responsibilities yourself then brings you back to section 119 and the ability for the owners to challenge your performance.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. So as you know, I'm advocating that, in fact, every council of owner or strata company should actually have a building inspection done annually. And I do believe that when you actually have a complex, you know, project being managed within your building, whether it's actually to do with water membrane or it's to do with cladding or something like that, that you really should get a project manager involved. And then you have a liability insurance element too, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, your council owners are protected on your office bearers' liability within your insurance, so they're covered there. But as Section 137 says, you know, you have to apply a reasonable due care and diligence in the functions that you're performing. Now, if you don't have the skill set to perform those functions, you need to be outsourcing and bringing in that skill set to assist you in the management of those functions. You know, you arguably you don't want to go to SAT. You know, you want to appoint a lawyer to take you to, you know, to represent you at SAT. You don't want to be, you know, reinforcing the foundations of a sagging corner of the building and overseeing and signing off on those works. You want an engineer to project manage and sign off on those works. Because if you go and put your name to it and you sign off on it and something goes wrong, they're going to come looking for you.
Yeah.
And it's going to be argued, did you have the, you know, the skill set to be able to project manage that?
Yeah, correct. I agree. Because at the end of the day, as Mark will know, when we did the Colliers session the other day, like I say to when I meet with my AGM or whenever I meet with a council of owners, I say to them, this is a 70 million or 100 million or even a $40 million asset, and you've got to treat it as such. So whenever I sit on my council of owners, I'm always thinking about what's best for that building. It's not what's best necessarily for the residents. It's what's best for the building, because you really need that building to stay healthy, and you need to make put your business hat on and make business decisions.
And that's right. And so I see one of the items that come up on the chat. Being on the council is it's often a thankless task, and you do have to invest in a lot of time to the management of the building. And I've always advocated that the strata company should look to reimburse or provide some sort of honorarium for those that do sit on the council because of the work that they do.
I agree.
And certainly, there's nothing stop. Well, I don't believe it. Mark might have a different opinion, but I don't think there's anything stopping the strata company by being able to award or pay an honorarium to the councillors for all the work that they do, because you do have a high degree of responsibility now going forward.
But also, I think it's very important when you're choosing your council of owners, when you're electing your council of owners at an AGM. Like we're now looking to elect 3 more council of owners because we've now down to 4. And, I've actually requested our Australian manager to actually put on the questionnaire, like, why do you want to be in this position? And so when I was voting for our council of owners, one of the gentlemen was a builder. A previous lady had been an accountant, and so they were the skill set I was looking to put onto my council of owners, because they're the people I would actually then normally want to put on a working group or a board or something like that. You don't want to just choose someone because they're nice. That's not what it's about. This is not a popularity contest. This is about who's got the best skill set.
And I would like to, ideally in an ideal world, what I would like to see is that people put up a basic CV on what their skill set is and submit that with the agenda of the strata company, so people can have time to better get to know who's going to be on the council. Yeah. And it's not those decisions which you often see at the meetings, like, who wants to go on the council? No one puts up their hand, and then you have to try and coerce someone to come in onto the council, and you arguably get someone that isn't committed to the role, doesn't actually participate for the next 12 months, and yet still has that responsibility. And you wonder why nothing gets done at the strata company, because you don't have those active members. So going forward, I would like to see, it's not a requirement. Maybe you could qualify it in a bylaw, but I would like to think that councillors actually have to nominate before the meeting and not at the meeting and not when the motion comes in.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Because the other item, particularly for new builds going forward, is Section 80, where the rights of the developer are subrogated to the strata company. And what that means is that the council of owners now have to take a far more active role in managing the defects period, the first 12 months of a building. And I would even go as far as is that if there's a retention negotiated between the developer and the builder, then that retention gets passed, or the strata company is given sign-off rights with the trust that retention may sit in between the builder and the strata company, and the developer no longer has control over the release of that retention.
Yeah. Now, just someone's just actually asked me, in respect to a 10-year maintenance plan, how does the council of owners go about creating one of these, especially for a small 10-lot owners? Well, first of all, you actually need to, I would think that that's where your building manager or some kind of external project manager would then actually be able to come in and help you do that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, in the end, there are a lot of options out there, and so you have the opportunity of a facilities manager that can come in and really do quite a detailed building diagnostic report on the scheme, and then help manage everything going forward. Now, I would argue a facilities manager should at least have a diploma to an undergrad qualification, if you're going to call yourself a facilities manager, or at least have a qualification in as an electrician or maybe hydraulic plumber.
Yeah.
You,
So I
you,
think, and also I know that I actually asked Stacey to do a 5-year for us to make sure, um, so to make sure that we actually had enough sinking fund, because of course now we have to be quite careful here, because a sinking fund is for maintenance, and then if you have any major works, that's when you actually look at a strata improvement loan, right? So
yeah,
people
yeah,
need to be quite clear that the sinking fund is not for major works, right? The sinking fund is for maintenance. But I asked Stacey to actually look at a 5-year plan for us, but then with your handover from the developer, they will tell you the elevators need to have this done to them, the paintwork needs to have this done to them. So they're all part of the handover, correct?
yeah. So certainly we do get on to the 10-year maintenance plan on the next slide. So maybe I'll talk a little bit more to that. But needless to say, I've always been an advocate for an honorarium for councillors. It is a very onerous task, and it's become even more onerous going forward. So things that people need to just consider before they put their hand up to go onto the council. But if we,
Yeah. Yeah. So please, everyone, if you're voting at the next AGM, please make sure that you actually choose the right group of people to go onto your council of owners. Okay. All right.
yeah,
I'm going to have to get out of here again to go to the next slide. How annoying is this, right? Anyway, we'll survive. All right.
But
Next
just a
slide.
couple of other things. So your strata managers should on Friday morning change their program to now reflect the interest rate at 11%. That was changed in the general regulations. So those owners in arrears, instead of getting charged 15%, that's now 11%. Other things to be aware of, expenditure on common property. It's really important that you get your budget right now going forward. I would always say have a generous budget and deliver savings, rather than have a very tight budget and then have to go back to the strata company and seek approvals to go above the line items. Excuse me. Certainly, as we're talking about improvements to common property. So there is now the ability to improve common property. That's capped at $500 per lot. So where an improvement to common property might exist is that you have a pool and you want to put now a barbecue alfresco area around the pool, which doesn't currently exist. That I would deem that an improvement to the common property. Now, if it's a 50-lot scheme, you do have up to 25 grand to spend on that. If it ends up costing $30,000 or more, then that expenditure item now has to be taken out of the budget and actually, left in the budget, but also has to be passed as a separate line item as a special resolution.
Yeah.
Now, special resolution, you need 50% of owners in attendance or to vote on the motion by way of unit entitlement and number of lots. So you've got 28 days to vote on that. So just be aware that some of those items will now sit under separate motions, and you're going to have to try and progress improvements to common property over that period of the general meeting, which now arguably will last 28 days.
I've had a question from Richard saying, do you consider the role of strata manager and facilities building manager as different roles? Very much so. So the strata manager is all about, the finances, making sure that the bills get paid, dealing with any antisocial behaviour within the apartment complex. They are not qualified to be a building manager or a facilities manager. Would you agree, Scott?
I wholeheartedly agree. In the end, it's not the role of the strata manager to be managing your 10-year maintenance plan. It's the role of the strata company, and if the strata company doesn't have the skill set, then they need to be appointing a building manager to assist them in that.
Yeah, and there's another question here. What is the duty of council of owners? Well, it's like basically running a business, right? You actually have to make sure that you're covered for your insurance, you have power to all your common facilities, that you actually maintain the building in terms of getting it painted, that your actual kind of like building inspections occur annually, that your elevators are being maintained, that your gardens are being maintained. Because if you actually start to see some issues within your building, the best thing you can do is actually have it documented, because then you get to, like, before the 6-year builder warranty situation. And if they're still around, that's when you actually need to have that building inspector show an ongoing deterioration. And so you can take legal action against the builder and all those kinds of things. Do you want to add anything to that, Scott?
Yeah, certainly, for new builds, there are a lot of protections. Often, there should be a 12-month defect liability period. So it's always something to look for in the contract when you sign up. And then you have your 6-year building warranty. I would always argue that, before you sign off on the retention fund release to the builder, you have an independent engineer undertake an analysis of the building just to review the defects. That's not a 10-year maintenance plan. That's something separate, but actually do a defects report for the building.
Yeah.
And use that to address any outstanding items, and have that sometimes it might take the builder a bit longer to address it, but if you've got that report, you've got something to keep coming back to the builder with, to say, well, you never actually adequately addressed this. You said you were going to fix it, you've painted over it, but you haven't addressed the structural crack underneath the paint. And so you've always got that report to keep coming back to identify that, it has been there is an issue there and it needs to be addressed, and it gives you a little bit more to stand on.
And definitely the council of owners have to make sure the sinking fund, that everybody's paying their strata fees, that it's going into the sinking fund, that there's actually, we actually have invested some of our sinking fund into a long-term high interest, kind of like deposit. So really what you're trying to do all the time is actually sustain the income coming into the building, which will then actually help pay for maintenance and ongoing repairs. Yeah. And we even, we actually make sure that our bylaws are enforced. So we actually approve in our bylaws in our building, if you actually have a dog and you want to actually have a dog in the apartment, you have to apply, so there's all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So that there is all those extra requirements which come under the functions of the strata company, and that you're actually performing the functions of the strata company, which are to enforce the bylaws. I see one of the questions, how often should you get your 10-year plan updated? Yeah. I would argue that as soon as it's out of date. So if you've said in year one you're going to fix the roof, and you come to the AGM the next year and the roof still hasn't been fixed, well, you need to update your 10-year maintenance plan and now put that under year 2 item. So I would suggest you're always reviewing your 10-year maintenance plan on an annual basis. It may be that you've addressed the items, or maybe there was nothing that needed to be addressed in that year, and so therefore it's okay, and you just you just pull forward the motion from the previous year. But as soon as you start to find that items are slipping and you're not actually addressing those items in your 10-year maintenance plan, then I would consider looking at updating it. And so therefore I think it's an annual thing that you need to look at, and that's accordingly.
So you're always forecasting. I agree. All right, I'll go to the next slide.
Yep.
All right.
So yes, I guess something to be aware of going forward is the quorum of the strata company. It's 50% of all owners. It's not just financial owners, but it's 50% of all owners for the first half hour. And if you don't end up with 50% of all your owners there in the first half an hour, that's whoever's there. So
do proxies still count?
Yeah. So the proxies so we still count the proxies as either they're in attendance or by proxy. So that constitutes to the quorum. But we do see some schemes where we only end up with 1 or 2 there each year, and in the first week no one turns up, and the second week we end up with 1 or 2 turn up, and then they decide on the agenda of the strata company for the next 12 months. Now, there's certainly the opportunity for them to amend budgets, pass the motions as they see fit. So your apartment is one of your biggest assets. You have to start attending the meetings, general meetings going forward, and you don't want to just leave it up to the few. Everyone needs to turn up and have a voice at the meetings going forward.
Well, and I'm a fan of apartment living. I call it the easy breezy lifestyle. But at the end of the day, what you are living in, like I said, is a $70 million asset. You can't just shut your door on your apartment and think that's all that you have to worry about. There's a whole building. If you start getting concrete cancer or structural issues with the building, then you can't live in that apartment, can you? So, at the end of the day, it's very important that you actually do participate and be very, council of owners, I do recommend that you actually do get out and knock on people's doors and get them to come to the meeting. I'm very fortunate in my apartment, we do get a good turnout. But the last thing you want to be doing is actually not being able to vote on things because you haven't got a quorum.
And then being critical on the decisions which are being made and progressed. If you don't, you need to make an effort to at least turn up to the one annual general meeting of the year. And have a voice and be proactive with regards to the way your scheme's managed.
Yeah. All right, next slide.
Yep.
Okay.
So I guess one of the big things now is the changing of your bylaws. So as from the 1st of May, all your bylaws have changed.
Yeah.
Several of your bylaws, like with the quorum bylaw, have now moved to the legislation. So they've actually now been taken out of the bylaws. And your Schedule 1 are now arguably referred to as your governance bylaws, and your Schedule 2 are now referred to as conduct bylaws. I would argue a lot of Schedule 1 bylaws that would sit in a management statement have now moved below the line to Schedule 2. Very few have probably gone up. All your bylaws have changed. And while you don't have to do a consolidated set of bylaws for that to take effect, it's certainly going to make it a lot easier for those managing the scheme and participating in the scheme if you do look to get your bylaws consolidated. It's certainly for strata managers that are tuned in. You now have to really be careful if you're looking to amend or change bylaws that you're, whether it's resolution without dissent or a special resolution, you need to be treated in accordance with the new legislation, not the way it might be currently sitting in the management statement. And the other thing is that the financial year, you've got 5 years, I think it is 4 or 5 years, to lock down the financial year of the strata company. Otherwise, it defaults to the 30th of June. Now, we don't want all the strata companies having their financial years the 30th of June. It would make a strata manager's life unbearable. So we are, and it would just create a significant backlog in meetings. So we will be looking to lock down your financial years going forward as at the date of your financial year. Now, that is just an ordinary resolution, but it's going to be a bylaw that you're going to pass by ordinary resolution, which will actually then trigger the consolidation of your bylaws. And I would certainly be encouraging you to get a lawyer to do it. I think Mark will be quite happy that I've said that. There needs to be decisions made about where bylaws are going to now be sitting, whether they're in Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, and how they need to be treated. Are they, under Section 119, are they unfairly prejudicial and maybe aren't a valid bylaw anymore? Like, I would certainly suggest that bylaws that flatly prohibit pets in the building might be deemed unreasonable. And might be now an invalid bylaw. That's correct. My take on it. So I would be encouraging strata companies to pass a bylaw that allows pets, but with a lot of qualifiers. So, you may limit the size, but you also ensure that they breed of dogs, but they're microchipped, they're registered animals, that if they do create noise, that there's means of addressing that and sending getting the owner to take the pet off for behavioural lessons. So I don't think you can just flatly stop pets coming into buildings. I'd strongly encourage that they now be proactive and pass bylaws that allow pets, but with a lot of qualifiers. And there's a lot of bylaws like that. Children unable to play in common property, which is a bylaw which is now no longer valid. It now sits in the legislation that children can play in common property. But if you've got concerns about the safety of some areas of the common property, it may be that you pass bylaws that prohibit children from playing on the roof of the building, for accessing those unsafe areas of the strata company. You just can't flatly prohibit children from playing in the corridors of the building anymore. They're entitled to use the strata company and the common property. Those bylaws are no longer valid.
I'm a big supporter of dogs and pets in apartments because I know how much people love them. Now, someone's saying here, do we have a no smoking clause? Can we have a no smoking clause? I know that my new apartment actually does have a no smoking clause in the bylaws.
Yeah, again, I don't think you can just say no smoking. I think you can say no smoking on common area, but I don't think the law has progressed far enough to be able to say you can't smoke in your apartment.
You can smoke in your apartment. We say not on the balconies and not in the common property. Yeah,
but in some instances, apartments, and certainly going forward with the change in the fire regulations, anything over 4 levels now has to have a smoke detector wired to the fire panel. You can't smoke in your apartment, so you have no option but to smoke on the balcony.
Yeah, right.
So you have to try and minimise smoke disbursement from outside your balcony. So you have to do the best you can, but I think it's a matter of watch this space. I think there's a big Supreme Court case going on in New South Wales at the moment on this one. So we'll just have to see how that might play out.
All right, cool. Oh, look, I managed to get it work. There we go. All right, finally. Here we go. Next one.
So I guess just another qualifier for what makes a bylaw invalid, and it's to the extent that they prohibit or restrict the devolution of the lot. Now, and this is, again, will be an interesting matter to see how it plays out, and that's why I call it the Ambiguity Act rather than the Strata Act. But if a DA permits a certain use of a lot, and then the bylaw goes on to restrict the use of that lot further, is that the devolution of a lot? Are you reducing the use of that lot to a worse estate or a lower estate? So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. But bylaws that limit the maximum potential of a lot arguably might be challenged now at that.
Well, why would you want to do that anyway, right? What would be the
call? A lot of the time it might happen for commercial properties.
Right.
So you might have a DA approval for retail on the ground floor, but you might want to limit that retail to food and beverage only, F&B only, and not allow clothes stores.
Yeah.
But if the DA approval's for retail, and retail has a broad category of food, clothing, sales, tattoo parlour, and then you have a bylaw that goes and narrows that down further, does Section 46 come into play?
Perfect. All right.
So and the rest of it I've touched on. So I guess the 10-year maintenance plan, which there is a lot of talk on this.
Yeah. There's some questions.
So it's for schemes that have 10 or more lots, or a $5 million replacement cost. So if you've got 10 lots, then you have to get a 10-year maintenance plan. If you've got 8 lots and your replacement cost is over $5 million, you have to get a 10-year plan.
Yeah. Cool.
The legislation says it has to be done every 5 years, but I would argue that as soon as it's no longer valid, you should be reviewing it. And I would argue that 5 years is too long a period to be having a look at it.
A lot can happen in 5 years, right?
A lot can happen in 5 years. So I would argue that as a minimum, you should be doing it every second year. But as soon as you become aware that it's no longer valid, I would be suggesting that you have this on your agenda every year. As with Section 118, and the passing of the authority for the council to sign contracts. So I think it just sits there every year, just so people are aware of what the projects are that are coming up, and they're being proactive around addressing those items. It's quite specific with regards to the 10-year maintenance plan, in that It doesn't say asset register, but I would argue that it is referring to an asset register in that whoever you engage to undertake your 10-year maintenance plan, they should be providing an asset register which details all the plant and equipment that belongs to the strata company. So these are all the pumps, CO2, carbon monoxide removals. Every piece of equipment in the building should be listed, and there should be a life cycle report that comes with your 10-year maintenance plan, so you know exactly where you're sitting.
Absolutely.
And you also want to make sure that the people you're engaging are actually going out and undertaking a property inspection. Now, through my business, we've found there are a few people delivering these 10-year maintenance plans that aren't actually undertaking an inspection.
You have to.
Of the building. They're collating the reports which the strata manager gives them and collating them into a single report. We had one that came back a few weeks ago, and I addressed that why wasn't the roof included in the 10-year maintenance plan. And we provided, this contractor was commissioned by the council owners. We sent everything to the council owners, but the council owners didn't forward it on to the person undertaking the 10-year maintenance plan. So despite having every year taken a resolution to the strata company to fix the roof, this was left out the 10-year maintenance plan, and the contractor engaged doesn't actually undertake an inspection. So he doesn't. When I asked him, did he get up on the roof and goes, "Oh no, that's not my job. We don't actually prepare or undertake that inspection. We just collate the reports you give us." So you really need to qualify who you're engaging to undertake these 10-year maintenance plans.
Yeah.
I would suggest council owners should not be undertaking them. It doesn't prohibit the council owners from undertaking it. It does say that you need to put the name of persons and the qualifications of the persons that have prepared the report.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't want my name put to it, not unless I had a significantly high, a high PI, but my PI doesn't cover me for maintenance reports. So, and I don't think the office bearer's liability for a strata company would cover you for undertaking maintenance plans for the scheme. So, these are items you need to outsource and get the right people in to prepare.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that, we actually really need to be very mindful that you are making decisions based on that asset, and they're serious decisions, aren't they? So you just cannot be light about it, and you have to take them seriously. And I would always 100% of the time say you must do an inspection. And if you are still able to have a dialogue with the developer, which fortunately I am able to with our building, you need to double check what's going on in terms of, then for example, we had some fire escapes and people were actually breaking into the building through the fire escapes. And so my council of owners wanted to actually put a lock on the fire escape, but that means that once you exited out of the fire escape into the car park, you couldn't get back into the building. So and if your children are up there, then you're in dire straits. So just always make sure that you're double checking everything that you do before you actually put it into place, because it may have just been a silly mistake, but we really don't want to have any silly mistakes, do we?
Yeah, no, and that's it. And you just want to make sure you're adequately covered. And the best thing about these 10-year maintenance plans, it's now making schemes be proactive rather than reactive.
Correct.
It gives us the ability to provide long-term plans for the owners that are living in the scheme, so you know what your liabilities are over the next 10 years. And arguably, a lot of these 10-year maintenance, these contractors providing the 10-year maintenance plan, they'll extend it to 15 years at not much extra cost, if not no extra cost. So push it out past to the 15-year mark. But make sure you're engaging with these contractors, because you don't want that contractor to list all these items in year one and find that your reserve isn't adequate, and then suddenly you have to raise a special levy to be able to address it. Make sure you're engaging with the contractor. Let him know where your reserve fund is sitting, and work with him on the preparation of that 10-year maintenance plan to make sure that you can actually financially meet the obligations which this contractor will lay out for you over the next 10 years. Don't be afraid to have a chat to them before they finalise a report. Work with them on where you're sitting financially, and then how that needs to look over the next 10 years. And then, with your strata manager, make sure that start setting your reserve at an adequate level. And I honestly believe that this could have an effect on the way that the valuers will approach the valuation of apartments going forward. I used to be a valuer, and when you value apartments, you don't take into consideration the budget and the reserve fund. You're really just doing a comparison of other apartments and how they sell around the area.
Yeah.
But if you've got a scheme that are identical side by side, and one's got $500,000 in its reserve fund and one's got nothing, which one do you want to buy in?
Yeah.
And going forward, purchasers are going to be looking at your reserve fund. They're going to be looking at your 10-year maintenance plan and where you're sitting on that. And these are going to be qualifiers to decide whether people want to buy into your strata company. And so it's going to be quite important that you get this right, and that you don't undercut where that reserve levy needs to now be set going forward.
All right, so I'm going to actually stop sharing the PowerPoint slides so I can kind of like then say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you back again. All right, so I'm just going to have a look now at these questions and see which ones have not been addressed. So yes, you will be sent a copy of the presentation. It will be actually recorded in with this presentation and this actual seminar. So I will make sure that that gets out to you guys, I'm hoping tomorrow. And then I've actually got a question here. With this new Scott, with this new changes, does the strata company have to sign a new management agreement with Section 118? Does that mean we need to actually call a general meeting prior to getting the new agreement executed to pass the ordinary resolution for the council to have that authority?
If you put this one to Mark, I think he would say yes.
Yes, Mark?
Just give me a second. I'd say, excuse me, sorry, Sam. I'd say no in response to that. It doesn't need to be at a general meeting, but it needs to be a ordinary resolution, which
right.
can.
So how would you do that?
Which can occur outside of a general meeting, and Scott can fill you in on the details.
Okay.
So we now have the ability to push out remotely a motion to owners to vote on.
Yeah.
So we can now actually progress just that single item by way of an email or a mail out to the owners and ask them to vote on the motion. And if we get adequate voting in favour of the motion, then we can pass that. So we don't actually have to call a general meeting where we all come in and sit down in the office, or we all have to get on Zoom and vote on the motion. We can do it remotely via a ballot paper.
Yeah.
And there's a few programs out there that enable that. We have a program in my office that we call Strata Vote. It was built for the Eastern Seaboard, and they've been voting by ballot for a long time over there. And a lot of the time, all the motions are decided before you even get to the AGM, because everyone just ticks the boxes, submits it online, and you've already got half the scheme have voted accordingly, and you know exactly which way things are going to play out. So there are new programs out there that help progress it. It does say you have to pass an ordinary resolution. So, so therefore that has to be a motion that is passed, arguably before that contract is signed. But we've always had in our agenda that the strata company authorises the council of owners to sign our engagement contract. I'll be falling back on that to a certain extent, because there is the obligation of trying to get all of our contracts re-signed over 6 months is already onerous enough. The fact that we also have to qualify that now by getting approval from the council of owners to then also push out an ordinary resolution enabling them to sign contracts, it's just too onerous. There is enough for us to try and deal with at the moment, particularly with the COVID pandemic, that I would be arguing that you'll be using whatever motion you can find in your agenda, maybe to get around that one. But going forward, as soon as you do have the next general meeting of the strata company, having that motion sitting there and passing it. Now, I know Mark as a lawyer would say that's not the right thing to say, but there is just too much. And fortunately, it's been a little bit prejudicial against the strata manager. A lot of elements in this legislation that we're not going to be able to get it all done in 6 months. So do the best you can where you can. If you can pass that ordinary resolution, that's great. But what if you've got an energy contract that needs to be signed over the next week on behalf of the strata company? Section 118 says you can't sign that document. If you need to change insurers and appoint a new insurer, Section 118 says that you can't sign that contract or that document. I think there's going to have to be a little bit of slack given to the strata managers and to strata companies and to the council of owners, because really this is an authority for the council of owners. And we just cannot overnight get that ordinary resolution passed to ensure that the strata company can continue to function. It just is not possible.
No.
So just have to do the best you can.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that was raised was, with the fact that we can now go electronic, where's that question gone? Now that we actually can go electronic, what have we got here? Sorry, there was, I'm just trying to get back up to the beginning of the questions. Electronic meetings being valid, then circular motions, are they okay? Does that make sense to you? That was from Melody.
Circular motions. So I guess motions that are passed annually, but in the end, while you can still conduct your meetings electronically, for an AGM, there's still an expectation that you call a location and or a Zoom address for the owners to log into. Some owners just want to come into the office. Now, you still have to be able to provide that facility for the owners that want to come into the office. Under the current COVID pandemic, we've relied on government mandates to say, well, you can't come into the office. And we've said that, you have to now conduct your meetings via Zoom, or we use WebEx, but everyone uses a different platform. But once we get through this COVID pandemic, there is going to be an expectation you still provide a location where if people want to, they can turn up for the meeting. Just like there's the obligation the strata company also has to be able to have the facilities that it can be handled remotely. So if someone is away on holiday and they want to participate, you still have to be able to provide that opportunity for them to be able to dial in, either video or teleconferencing. Yeah.
Well, I know that we're actually calling an EGM for our council of owners, and what we're doing is just basically putting up the nominees onto basically a survey monkey, and people can go online and vote.
And there's some of the challenges which we're going to have is where a poll is called. If a poll is called, it is very challenging to try and progress the poll through some of these online platforms which we have. And it may be that the chair of the meeting will just have to reconvene the meeting at a later date if that's the only way they can progress it. Certainly, I had a 226 lot scheme 2 weeks ago, and we needed to go to a ballot on the council owners. We had 5, the bylaws restricted it to 5, and we had 8 nominate. Now, the only advantage is that the chair, I had about 60% of the vote. So I basically said, I've got instruction here on how to vote. I can control the vote. And I requested that the meeting didn't go to a poll, and said, I've been instructed to vote for these 5 people. This is the way I'll vote. This will be the way the motion will unfold, because I control 60% of the vote. Yeah. And the other 3 applicants were willing to withdraw the nomination.
Yeah.
But we certainly gave them reassurances if the position was vacated, then they would be considered by the council going forward. But yeah, there are a lot of limitations for poll votes, and we just have to do the best we can.
Yeah.
And the Strata Monkey is a great solution.
Yeah, yeah. What is a reasonable honorarium for being a council of owners? I guess it does depend on how much work you're going to be doing. It does depend on the size of the apartment complex. I would think if you're meeting, every month, which is 12 times a year, and you've also got, the AGM, plus then you might be doing, some extra stuff outside. I would think somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 a year would be an appropriate sum.
I've always suggested that it's, somewhere between $20 to $30 per council meeting, per
Yeah.
councillor.
Yeah.
That's a figure I've pulled out of the air. I have just had a scheme approved $10,000
Yeah.
for the council owners, because they're arguing that a lot of things are dealt online, so they have to have Wi-Fi requirements. They've put an extra program in which they have to manage, and so they have to pay for that program. So it's each to their own. But if it's a little scheme, it might be $50 for the year. It's what the owners can afford, and 90% of the time, it's probably going to be zero.
But I think at least if you're offering an honorarium, you're actually going to get more nominees, right, for the actual positions. And that actually then gives you a truly democratic voting process.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to better elect your councillors with the people you need.
Yes.
And so, I do think that there'll be some benefits if there's an honorarium considered.
Yeah.
So you just have it, but every strata company is unique and has to be treated differently.
Yeah. All right, so scrolling down. Do you know of any facilities managers, Scott, that you would be happy to recommend?
I won't. I'm happy if someone wants to give me a ring or email me offline. There's a lot of good companies out there. There's a lot of confusion. I'm a little bit critical of some of these cleaning companies that might suggest that they provide building and facilities management. I would argue that they provide not much more than a concierge facility, and I would say concierge facility isn't a building management or facilities management.
Absolutely not.
Role. And I think it's really important, going forward, and I'm going to try and work with FMA because I'm also a member of the Facilities Management Association, just getting a clear qualification of where a facilities manager sits, where a building manager sits, where your concierge and your caretaker might sit, where does your strata manager sit, going forward, so that people can, if they're looking to apply for, get these roles performed by their strata company, they know how to qualify the individuals, and do they have that skill set to be able to meet what they need. Yeah,
that would be great to actually provide like a criteria.
Yeah, so that if you want the guy just to deliver your mail, open the door for you, help organise your dry cleaning, and doing those basic roles, I would say that's concierge.
Yeah,
if you want him to meet with the contractors, take the put on work orders for you, help tender for the contractors, then I would suggest that's a building manager. If you've got large-scale building works and you need a full building diagnostic, and they're actually going to be managing large works programs, I would suggest it's sort of a project manager or facilities manager that you need. But I would suggest, you want a building manager that can also do handyman jobs. So if you're looking for a building manager, you want him to make sure he's proficient with a screwdriver and a wrench. So he can clean out the drains and tighten the doors and do those small roles, but also help the contractors identify some of the issues.
Perfect. Do small schemes that have previously opted out of the requirements still remain opted out?
Sorry?
So this is a question from Amy. Do small schemes that have previously opted out of the requirements still remain opted out? I don't know quite what that means, because if you're a strata, you're a strata. You can't opt out of the strata.
The 5 and 6 lot schemes have different requirements.
Okay.
So Mark probably would know what section of the Act. I think it's 5 lots and less. They don't have to have an AGM every year, and they don't always have to pass a budget every year.
Right.
But where they will be qualified is that, I've got an office building that it's got 6 lots, but it's 8 stories, and its replacement cost is $15 million. Now, the 10-year maintenance plan is for 10 lots or a building that has a replacement cost of more than $5 million.
Yeah.
So, there are some small or 3-4 lot apartments in West Perth and South Perth that are valued at over $15 million, and they might only have 4 or 5 lots in them. So they still will be caught up in the obligations. To have a new maintenance plan and hold an AGM.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, just make keep going down. We currently do a maintenance walk around before engaging contractors and have a 3 and 5 year paint plan. Under this, would this be adequate as a date checked, or does it have to be a quote from a licensed contractor?
Well, I sort of already said that in the end, the strata company has to approve a 10-year maintenance plan. And whoever prepares that 10-year maintenance plan, they have to put their name to it and what their qualification is. So it's no longer a 3 to 5 year walk around. You know, the strata company has to engage someone, or someone has to be willing to undertake a 10-year maintenance plan, not just a 3 or a 5 year one.
Yeah.
I would be cautious of accounts of owners going around and doing a maintenance plan, because if you miss something,
Yeah.
and then you go back to your owners and say, oh, we've done our maintenance plan and we don't think anything needs to be addressed, and the next minute a balustrade fails and someone falls off the balcony, they're going to start looking at the individual accounts and say, well, you told us you did a maintenance plan and you didn't get anyone else in to prepare this.
Yeah.
We're probably going to sue you.
Yeah. Now, and this is actually for and that's from a council of owners I know who actually have someone who's quite litigious already within their council of owners. All right, if the owners won't approve funds to cover costs, is there any way of enforcing that?
No, like the legislation says you must have a reserve fund, but it doesn't qualify how much that reserve fund has to be. Yeah. But I would certainly be cautioning owners that don't have a reserve fund and don't pass a reserve levy, that don't think you're going to be able to sell your apartment anytime soon, because anyone looking to buy into that scheme, they'll have to be provided as part of the sales disclosure the 10-year maintenance plan. And if they see there's a 10-year maintenance plan and there's no reserve fund, why would they want to buy in? Because suddenly you're going to hit them at some point in time to action those works.
Yeah. Good one. All right. So Melody's asked, for all the legal opinions required, Mark Atkins, you have to stay silent on this. For all the legal opinions required on a per lot basis, what would be a reasonable sum to budget each year?
Every scheme's, you know, as I said, every scheme has different obligations.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a small 18 lot scheme down south, and they got hit with a significant amount of works and put them significantly in arrears and that to take out a loan. And then I've actually got smaller schemes that might have $150,000 to $200,000 sitting in their account, and they're probably set for 10 years. They don't have to worry about a reserve.
Yeah.
I've always said, rule of thumb for a new scheme, for me, my rule of thumb's been 0.1% of the replacement cost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if your scheme's valued at $100 million, you should be raising $100,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. If it's 10 million, you should be raising $10,000 a year. So, but that's for a new scheme. A lot of schemes haven't had a reserve in the past, and so there's probably a bit of catch up for some of those older schemes.
Yeah, Mark, I can see you've unmuted. Do you have a comment to make here?
I do. Thanks, Sam. You're too kind. I'm not going to answer the question directly. Scott answered it very well. It depends on each scheme. But I will say one thing. It becomes more important than ever with the reforms that each strata company very carefully consider what it needs to budget for the next year and the year after, because the process to expend money that's not authorised by a budget is now much, much harder.
Yeah.
So in circumstances where you may need urgent legal assistance, you want to make sure you've got an item for professional fees or something broadly described like that, that's going to cover you off if you do need that assistance. Having a budget for it doesn't mean you have to spend it, but it protects you if you do.
Yes, you can share this recorded session with your council of strata owners. That's all fine. This is why we're doing these kinds of things. So the more information going out there, the better. All right. Okay. Any other things? Okay. I'm just reading down. If paid, does that mean the councillors are employees? So if you actually do receive an honorarium, does that mean that the council of owners are employees of the strata company? Now, I would think no, but tell me, Scott, what do you think?
Well, arguably you're an office bearer already of the strata company. you're performing a role in managing the scheme. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Mark might be able to answer if it's a technically, but I think you already are an employee to a large extent with regards to the duties you're performing, and you have a similar obligation. So if you do take that honorarium, do you have to be declaring it as with the ADO? Yes, you probably do.
Yeah.
But it's something that and whether. I just feel that if you want to get quality people on your council owners, you can't ask them to volunteer anymore, particularly with the liabilities that they now have.
Right, and I've had someone say here, but people will then just actually want to get onto the council owners to be paid. But this actually, what the idea about being paid is actually to bring forward the best candidates, right?
We're not talking about. I'm talking about an honorarium of $20 a meeting. Now you might only have 4 meetings a year, so there's $80. Now,
Yeah.
you can live on that.
What will that buy? 2 carts of beer.
Some strata companies will have a council meeting every month, as you do with your scheme, Sam.
Yeah.
So again, it's 12 meetings a year. Okay, you pocket $240, but really, it's not going to even cover your petrol money if you have to drive to the meeting. If
Correct.
You don't site, or you have the meeting at the strata manager's office. So I'm not suggesting you start writing $40,000 employment contracts, because I don't think you're going to have owners that are willing to vote on that. I'm just suggesting a token honorarium to help supplement the costs. You're already giving a lot of time to the strata company. Those incidentals that you do incur, perhaps there can be some consideration by the strata company to reimburse the councillors that do give up so much time.
Yeah, great. All right. I think that we have answered all the questions. Is there any other questions quickly? No? All right. Great. Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Mark Atkinson, for the few. Sorry, you can hear my dog. He's going a bit crazy. You can. I would like to thank. Shh, shh, shh. Come here. Come on. You can come here. I'd like you to thank Scott, and there you go. There's my wee doggy. I'd like you to thank Scott and also Mark Atkinson today for joining us. And I'm certainly very grateful for giving your time today, and I'm certainly very grateful that we could all stay in our cozy homes and still share this information. So on behalf of WA Apartment Advocacy, thank you to Scott, thank you to Mark. We ended up having 65 people tune in, which was fantastic. So thank you everybody for being so interested and for being a major part of this, because I tell you what, we all need to be on top of what's going on, otherwise we're going to get left behind, and that's not going to be good for anyone, is it?
That's right. And thanks very much for having me, Sam, and to everyone out there, stay safe tonight. What I've presented tonight is my opinion. I still encourage you all to go get a legal opinion, and I'm sure Mark will contradict me in a few areas, but hopefully it has been helpful and that you've all been able to take away something from it tonight.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe, and I'll keep you in tune with more sessions of this kind as we move forward. Nice to see you there, Leanne, as well, one of my other sponsors, CHU Insurance. Nice to see you, darling. So thank you, everybody, for coming along. I hope you enjoyed the session. I will get this out in the email, I'm hoping tomorrow. So otherwise, if you've got any other questions that come to you in the middle of the night, please feel free to send them through, and I'll forward them on to Scott and to Mark. All right, everybody, have a great night. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you for.
Bye.
See you. Bye.